individuals, these extraordinary individuals on these extraordinary journeys. Motivation is not an issue for them. Staying focused is not an issue. But what can come between them and their pursuit is themselves, which is managing their emotions, which is very closely related to their self-confidence, their self-worth, their self-esteem, their self-efficacy, their self-belief. So when we talk about building self-confidence in them, I wouldn't call it so much as building, because they have the self-confidence inside of them. It's about facilitating that self-belief. I do my best to not judge anyone as much as possible. This is a routine I follow throughout the day. As much as possible, I do my best not to judge anyone. In doing so, I do my best to not place my values on them, place my belief system on them as much as possible.
Your platform for creating ripples of inspiration. Welcome back, listeners. It is no exaggeration if I were to call today's guest is the champion of champions. A sports psychologist working with elite international athletes and Olympic champions, a mind coach for the Royal Challengers Bengaluru, and an ambassador of athletes and coaches' mental wellness. It's my pleasure to welcome Sanjana Kiran on Inspire Someone today. Sanjana, finally, date with IST has come true.
Yeah, I was looking forward for this one. I've heard some of the interviews and they're truly inspiring. I have got inspired by them. So I don't know if my conversation will inspire someone, but if it can lend some support or some more support to the athletes and coaches to this conversation, I'll be happy.
Well, that's a tall call out. Thank you so much for that. Let's jump right in. So, what does the role high performance sports psychology expert entitled Sanjana to do? How do you prepare for something like this?
I mean, it's not an entitlement. I think no one should feel entitled to anything, but certainly looking back at the 2 decades and over work I've had the opportunity to do, it certainly feels like a privilege to share amazing journeys with these amazing individuals. Something I would have loved to do because I loved sports when I was young and I wasn't allowed to follow that dream. But still, when I look at the journeys and how much they give selflessly while coming across selfish, unfortunately, it really feels so privileged to be, sharing that space with such close quarters and having their trust in me that I will hold the most precious thoughts, feelings, experiences they share confidential. And for someone to place that trust on you, I think that's huge.
No, that's a huge responsibility. How do you prepare for a career like this, Sanjana?
Actually, in my case, I didn't prepare, to be honest. I did my schooling. I was never serious about education. And not that, in my family, they kind of expected us up to be serious about education and be ambitious about a career. And then I knew from day one that, after high school, I wouldn't be allowed to do sports. So I did whatever sports I could. And I accepted that fact. Not that I was very sad about it or did something about it. And then I did my pre-university and I did my basic degree. So it was almost like while waiting for an arranged marriage, I was going through this education. So through my BSc, I got interested in psychology. I did a weird combination of chemistry, botany, and psychology in my BSc. While waiting for my arranged marriage, I got into Masters of Clinical Psychology. That is when I started really getting interested in psychology per se, sort of seriously interested. And that's where I met my husband. And it's a long story, but to cut short the story, we moved to Singapore. And then this is where I kind of got into a PhD. And during PhD is when I thought, okay, sports psychology. So perhaps somewhere at a subconscious level, there was this kind of yearning to be around sport and be engaged with sport. And I remember very vividly during my high school when our new color TV arrived. This is mid 80s, 1980s. We used to have this World of Sport program for about half an hour. And I had seen Olympic rings there. Honestly, I didn't know what it took to be an Olympian, but somewhere, I was just like, I so wanted to be there. And I felt I could be there, although there was no coaching, formal coaching, and most of the sports I learned myself. So perhaps that's why when I considered a PhD here, taking up sports psychology kind of came organically. And then one thing led to the other while doing my PhD itself. There was a lot of requests to work with athletes, and I didn't think I could do high performance so early in my career, so to say. But then one thing led to the other, and it's just through word of mouth, things happened. And I just went with the flow, gave my 100% to whatever opportunity that landed on my lap, and did my best I could.
Wow, sounds so surreal.
Yeah. But having said that, one can prepare for this career if they're interested in sports psychology. A basic degree in general psychology is of utmost importance because it really helps you understand the human nature and human behavior at a very, and gives you a foundational grounding. And then certainly you want to specialize in clinical psychology, which helps you understand the not so normal behavior of humans, and then perhaps take on sports psychology as a specialization further.
Wonderful. Again, for the benefit of the listeners, Sanjana, what is high performance sport and the correlation with psychology? If you can just shed some light on that.
When we say high performance, right? So we're talking about individuals who have mostly mastered this skill in terms of technique, in terms of tactics, in terms of experiences. They're self motivated, they're driven, they're passionate at that point in time, they're very focused. So during competition, because their techniques, their skills are already in place, right? When we're talking competition, a good 90% of whether they display their best potential depends on their mind game. So that's high performance. So, as a sports psychologist, for me, I'm walking the tightrope because I'm very aware of the fact that really it's the mind game that matters. Now, can I control the mind game of an athlete? No. I can only facilitate their best mind game. But for them to actively and consciously and at subconscious level use it and do what they have to do, it really depends on them. So that is what high performance is. And then to get to a point of being mentally prepared or having that mind game that allows you to display your best potential requires a lot of effort, a lot of commitment, a lot of training hours on the mind skills, back and forth discussions, being very honest with your sports psychologist, being okay to be very vulnerable, because everything about your life impacts your thoughts. And ultimately, your thoughts impact your performance because thoughts impact your feelings impacts your physiological markers, and all of this impacts your performance.
Understood.
Yeah, it really is a very intense journey. And on the sports psychologist part, it can be very mentally fatiguing. And then because we spend many years with the athlete, for example, I've been working with athletes over 2 and 3 Olympic games. I have a bunch of 6 athletes who I've worked with in the last 2 Olympics. They're going to their third Olympic, and these are gold medalists, and they have to recreate that gold medal. So the journey is super intense, and as a sports psychologist, I need to help them dig really, really deep. So for me to be able to do that, I need a very sound grounding on human behavior. All of that I can't achieve through knowledge gathering only. It also depends on self-reflection and the experiences and the maturity that comes, as you work with more and more high performers. But really, psychology is amazing. The human mind, it's just so amazing.
No, that's very, very intriguing. And also envy the space that you occupy working with Olympians, champion athletes is no mean task.
Well, I don't see them as Olympian because the unfortunate thing about my role in the life of a sports person is that I can never be a fan of to a sports person because if I'm the fan, then I miss the bus. So
Yep.
I don't see them as Olympians. Even if I had to work with a grassroots athlete today, I would work with the same commitment. But just that the intensity and the depth of work is different. I see them as human beings. They really, really are human beings.
I think that's very well put. They're human first, athlete next.
Yeah, that's very true. And I just see them as humans, extraordinary humans on extraordinary journeys. And because I understand these journeys, I also understand how much they need to dig deep to pull that strength out. And, even to be your best physically, technically, tactically, you need to dig deep from your mind to have that self belief that there's more to you, uh, to dig deep for that open mindedness that allows you to fearlessly explore and go for it.
What does it mean when you're working with these champion athletes who have reached the zenith? You mentioned about working with Olympians who have been gold medalists for the last couple of cycles. How do you bolster their confidence? How do you kind of bolster their, if at all, if I were to say inadequacies? Just walk us through the approach that you take to kind of handle these kind of situations.
These individuals, these extraordinary individuals on these extraordinary journeys, motivation is not an issue for them. Being staying focused is not an issue. But what can come between them and their pursuit is themselves, which is managing their emotions, which is very closely related to their self confidence, their self worth, their self esteem, their self efficacy, their self belief. So, when we talk about building self confidence in them, I wouldn't call it so much as building because they have the self confidence inside of them. It's about facilitating that self belief to come to the fore and kind of help them. So they need to really, really work hard. Now, when we talk about self belief, right, there's this self belief that I will work really hard, practice, train, even if I don't want to wake up at 4 a.m., I will anyways do it and I'll make sure that I master the skill. So that self belief they already have. Most of them have it. That part of the self belief that is a little shaky is will I deliver when it matters? The what ifs. So, when you look at self confidence of a high performer, be it a sports situation or be it even a corporate situation for that matter, we can't put self confidence in one bucket. So, there are different areas that require that self confidence, and certainly working hard, staying committed, staying dedicated to what's important to you. So, that self belief is already very high. But like I said, the self doubt, what if something goes wrong? What if I'm unable to deliver my best? What if I have an unpleasant surprise in an opponent who's so much more better than me on that day? So, this is the shakiness they have. And this shakiness stems from irrational, distorted thinking. High performers tend to have catastrophic thinking. If a tiny bit goes wrong, it comes across to them as catastrophe because these are perfectionists. And perfectionism is a side effect of these extraordinary endeavors, if I were to call it that way. Perfectionism is needed because you want to be perfect with your technique, you want to be perfect in mastering your art, etc. But that's positive perfectionism. But there's negative perfectionism where you never feel it's enough. You never feel you're good enough. So that is what creates that self doubt about will I deliver when it matters. So most of my work centers around that. And to be able to help them achieve that, I need to take their focus on self compassion because high performers are very, very difficult on themselves. They are the worst enemies. So have them develop that self compassion, that it's okay to fail, that you're human after all. So, because most high performance live robotic lives, and that is how the sports ecosystem has kind of groomed them to be. So, bringing them back to the humanness to help them experience being human. and helping them understand that it's okay, these feelings are all right. But because you have self doubt doesn't mean things are gonna go wrong when it matters. So, helping them accept these thoughts and then working through them. So, that is one of the toughest things to do with these individuals because they're so set in their mind and they're so set with a mindset pattern which has helped them the last time, which as a sports psychologist you can see that clearly this is not the way forward for the next time. And then most importantly, helping them detach from outcomes. So day in and day out you're training with an outcome in mind. For 2024 Paris, all of my clients have 1 year short.
Right.
So all the more the focus is on outcome, making what happens in about 4 years, making that happen in 1 year less with the COVID situation around and the challenges with it, correct? So helping them detach from the outcomes. So focusing on the outcomes is important when you're training because you want a sense of direction to what you're doing, which then kind of dictates the intensity of effort you put in, right? And that is when every training counts. It becomes effective and efficient in helping you reach where you want to be. There's nothing wrong with it, all right? But then around competition time, the mindset must switch from a training mindset to a competition mindset. So this is similar to, someone, let's say a CEO making a very important presentation in front of the board of directors. And their nod is super important for the future of that organization. So when the CEO is preparing for all of this information and going through different team leaders and understanding what's needed and all of that and crafting that presentation, the outcome has to be in mind. Okay, what is going to impress these people? What is going to help the board of directors understand my vision? Or what is the in it for us as an organization? But come presentation time, that outcome mindset has to go. It has to be very process oriented, believing that your intention is good, believing that you've done all the homework you could do within the time and space and circumstances, and just sharing it and talking about it. So that mindset is going to help this individual be their best through that discussion of presentation or that performance.
Well, that's a very interesting call out. On one hand, you're saying that be committed to the goal, focus on the goal during training. But when it actually matters, you need to have the distinction to kind of stay away from it. It's kind of decoupling from it. It's very difficult. So how would you kind of, as some of the tips, if you were to kind of share or what you have already done, how would you go about doing something like this?
So you can't expect it to happen when during important situations like in the case of the CEO, that big presentation, or in the case of an Olympian, say Olympics or a World Championships, unless you have practiced that in smaller competitions or smaller presentations. So this is a skill you can develop. And this is a skill you should have practiced enough or used enough, applied enough for it to be able to help you when it matters most. So that is the work we do over the 3 years or over the two Olympic cycles for that matter, or three Olympic cycles. So this should become a very unconscious habit, automatic habit. It should become so much a part of you where you don't have to remind yourself, you know what, now I need to switch. It should organically happen. And that is how a human perspective should be. When a self belief is shaky about something, about, performing, maybe a school exam or a board meeting or a competition, we need to remind ourselves of our intention, that our intention is in place, that our is in place, that we are focused, that we want it real bad. And then we have done whatever we could in the given circumstances we were in. Tell ourselves that let's just go and do what we can and leave the rest. Because the outcome will anyways will be decided. We don't have control over the outcome, but certainly we have the control over the process.
I think that's a brilliant call out. We don't control the outcomes, but we control the process. So very true. And in your working with these champion athletes, do they dabble with fear? You did mention about these Olympians. Would they have that fear saying that what if I don't get the next gold medal?
Yeah, that is what you're training for. Fear is what makes you establish those goals and work towards it. And fear is not a bad thing, but do you use your fear to get up, get going, do what you need to do, and make things happen to the best of your ability in the given circumstances? Or do you allow fear to get the better of you, to put pressure on you, to not allow you to try? Do you succumb to that fear? That's the difference. There's parts of fear that's rational when the fear makes sense, but there's parts of fear that's irrational. So irrational fear that, you know what, no matter how much I try, I'm going to collapse. No matter what I do, this is how the outcome is going to be. So deciding for yourself that you're set for failure is actually setting up yourself for failure. So ultimately, it depends on how you approach a competition or how you approach a performance, say a board meeting or a presentation. Is your approach to avoid failure? That is irrational fear. Or is your approach to put your best foot forward? Or on this side too, you'll have fear, but your fear is rational. So helping these individuals understand the difference. Because when we have general conversations, fear is seen as one entity. Self-belief is seen as one single entity. But we need to really dig deep to understand. So what is the root, or what are the thoughts that are bringing about this fear? Are the thoughts rational or irrational? Because ultimately it's the thoughts that impact our emotions and feelings, and fear is one of the emotions.
Wonderful. I think this is good stuff. We will come back to elements of what we can draw from these experiences to normal human beings. We are not Olympians day in, day out, but what are the lessons that we can incorporate from the lessons that you have seen working closely with a lot of these champion athletes? So before we get there, so if you are ready, shall we get started with power of three round?
Wish me good luck. Thank you.
Three mental hacks that you can share with our listeners.
Focus on your intention when the going gets tough. Do not compare yourself with others, because oranges are oranges, but there's a lot of difference between any two oranges. Our circumstances are different, our situations are different. So this does not mean that you give yourself excuses or you become lazy, but really, when you compare yourself with others, you don't grow, you stunt. And third would be is to just do, whether you like what you're doing or not, whether you love or are passionate of what you're doing or not. But the fact that you're into something suggests that you need it for whatever reason. So give it your 100% and find joy in it. So these are the three hacks. This is something I apply to myself too.
Nice. Three athletes you would like to coach.
I'm sorry, I don't have a preference.
Anybody for that
Because
matter.
no, I don't have a preference because I don't choose my clients. Through word of my mouth. My clients reach out to me generally, and then I'm ready to work with anyone because I don't see them as big, medium, small. I just see them as a human who I would look forward to have amazing interactions with, because with every athlete I grow, with every coach experience I grow.
Now, if you were to have a wish, if you have to have a wish list and say these are three individuals whom you would want to associate with, or three teams you would want to associate with.
No, it's like asking a doctor who are three patients you would like to have.
Okay,
So I'm
fair
sorry.
point.
I'm
No
sorry.
worries, no problem. Three lessons learned in your professional journey so far.
There's no replacement for empathy. Unless you have empathy, you can't be human. That's one thing. Then the power of emotional intelligence, understanding your own emotions and why you feel a certain way, understanding others' emotions and why perhaps they feel a certain way, and using all of this information towards relationship building. So that's another thing I learned. And then what I understood is every day is a new day. It doesn't matter that you failed yesterday or you achieved your biggest dream yesterday. The sun rises for everyone. So if you have fallen, you can rise too. And let's say you had already risen, you can rise some more.
Great perspective there. Three unique routines followed by Sanjana.
I do mindful meditation a couple of times every day because I most of my work days are 18 hours. This is how I set up myself. There's no one to blame for this. I don't have a holiday. I work all 365 days. I enjoy most of what I do. So I do this mindfulness meditation of 2 short minutes, 3 short minutes, 5 short minutes when I'm mentally fatigued because I have to use a lot of my mental energies for these conversations and to think for my clients, etc., etc. So that's one thing. There's no routine to it, but as and when I do that. Second, I love tea with milk and sugar. So that is my weakness. Uh, so that's something I follow. If I want to fall asleep, I have generally in almost days I only have about 3 hours of sleep. So if I can't fall asleep, a tea will help me fall asleep. If I'm feeling sleepy, a tea will help me feel refreshed. And third, I do my best to not judge anyone as much as possible. This is a routine I follow throughout the day. As much as possible, I do my best not to judge anyone. In doing so, I do my best to not place my values on them, place my belief system on them as much as possible.
Cool. So moving on, like I mentioned earlier, on bringing in an element of the lessons that you have seen, learned on the sports scene to what we as commoners can adapt. So one question that I had was, are there any specific lessons learned, any unique routines of the athletes that has impressed you?
Yeah, as much as athletes are, I mean, I'm talking about high performance here. They're very self-motivated and focused and etc. etc. Not all of them like the fact that they have to wake up very early in the morning or they have days when they don't feel like training but they still make it happen. So to stay true to your goals, the level of integrity they have, that is something amazing about them. So another is their servitude. Like I said earlier, athletes, elite athletes, high performers come across as very selfish, so selfish that they're so busy with their own endeavors. But trust me, they're doing it for the sports ecosystem. So their power to give so much. I mean, that's amazing. And third is their resolve, their resolve to get back up and do what they must do even if the going gets tough. They resolve to start afresh every competition, even if they won a gold medal or if they were the last person standing. A new competition is another new opportunity, and they start from zero. For that, it requires that you fail well. Even if you failed, you want to fail well, where, of course, it hurts that you didn't reach the top in that particular competition, but you learn the lessons from it, you grow from it, you accept it, and it takes a lot to accept failure. So failing well is something I learned.
Great lessons there. Servitude, integrity, resolve, and failing well. And you're somebody who have coached folks across the sports arena. It's just not one specific sport. If you were to use a lens and say, what is the common denominator of success across these various sports and sports person, what would that be?
I would come back to resolve, resilience, being industrious, being resourceful, emotionally very, very sensitive, having rational fears, having a child within, compassion for others. That's something I see. Servitude. Then I think these.
I think we would be missing a critical point if we don't touch upon this particular subject, particularly in the times that we are in, which is about mental well-being. As this has become mainstream, I know you're being doing a lot of pioneering work in this particular field. Talk us through the importance of mental well-being for athletes in general and for the listening public here as well. the importance of it, and what are some of the things people can do to ensure that they take care of their mental well-being?
Before we get into that, it becomes important to understand what it means to be mentally well. When we talk about well being, we're not talking about the opposite of mental illness. We could not have mental illness but still not be well. That we need to understand. So, being mentally well is to feel pleasant most of the times, if not all the times. Be happy with who we are, be largely content with what we have, be in peace with the goals we might have set, our needs, our wants, be secure within ourselves, have the ability to love ourselves no matter how we are. It could be a physical appearance, it could be a financial condition, it could be whether we have a certain skill set or not, but loving ourselves and being comfortable with who we are, understanding our own emotions, doing the right thing for ourselves, having the courage to employ integrity. So, integrity is doing the right thing when no one's around, correct? So, having the courage to do that, which requires conscience and developing that conscience or having that conscience to know that we are doing the right thing. So, broadly, that is being well or mentally well. Now, there's nothing wrong in wanting to reach the stars. There's nothing wrong at all. I think as humans, we should all explore our fullest potential. There's nothing wrong in being the most richest person in the world. There's nothing wrong with it. There's nothing wrong with having everything the world has to yourself, correct? But why you need that becomes important and how you go about achieving. So, are you achieving that from a place of integrity, doing it lawfully, are doing it honestly, doing it with compassion for others by not stepping over others or taking away what belongs to others, etc., etc. So, when we talk about well-being, there are four aspects to it. I think this is what I've kind of deduced. There could be many more. So, one is, do we feel psychologically safe? Do we feel respected? Do we feel accepted? Do we feel safe for interpersonal risk taking through conversations with people who matter to us? It could be a workplace, it could be a relationship you are in, it could be your family, it could be your friends, it could be your neighborhood, it could be the governance. So that's the psychological safety part. Then the other part is being self aware. Being self aware of, are you taking good care of yourself? I talked about loving yourself. Are you emotionally intelligent? Do you have the skills to survive day to day challenges in life? Are you aware of your financial condition and how you would like it to be? Are you putting all your eggs in the same basket? Do you have a dual career? Are you nurturing hobbies? How are your relationships? Do you have some very strong relationships? Do you have those people in your life who you can trust with whatever you share with them? And also those who will call you out when you're doing wrong without the hesitation of losing your friendship with them, etc., etc. Then the third aspect is to have the mental resilience to deal with life's challenges, to deal with challenges at work, etc., etc. So, what are your self confidence level? What is your self esteem? What is your self concept? What is your self belief? Are you self motivated in the work you do? For example, like I told you earlier, if you are stuck in a job which we do not like or love, or it wasn't even our choice, and we are still there, chances are there's a reason why you're still there. So find something about it that you can hold on to that is interesting, that you can start liking, and keep at it while you try something else on the side. So simple things like that in terms of mental resilience. What is your focus? Is your attention divided amongst a lot of things, or are you making calculative choices, informed decisions? What about your leadership qualities? What about your interpersonal relationship qualities? Do you have that in place? So all of that is the mental resilience. Now, mental resilience does not mean that you put up with bullshit, you put up with people disrespecting you, you put up with illegal power on you, etc. Mental resilience is about, are you able to cope? in a way that is healthy to you? Or are you pushing all your pain and miseries under the rug? Because when you do that, that is what can come in the form of a mental illness in the future. That's one of the reasons mental illnesses ensue for most of us. And the fourth aspect is recognizing whether something is okay or not okay with us. So most of us aren't aware when we are not okay. So understanding the signs and symptoms of whether you're okay, that's kind of very important, because unless you recognize that about your health, then it becomes difficult for you to understand why some of the things are the way they are. For example, in understanding the signs and symptoms, you want to reflect on your thoughts, your feelings, your behaviors, and physical changes. For example, in terms of thoughts, are you excessively criticizing yourself? Do you have low self worth, or do you value yourself very less? Do you find yourself being very pessimistic about most things in life? Are your thoughts those of hopelessness, helplessness? Do you have challenges with focus, concentrating on stuff? Do you have challenges with memory? And in terms of feelings, you want to kind of reflect on, are you angry most of the time? Anger, all of the feelings I'm about to say are very normal to a human being. But if it's happening most of the time, then that is a sign that something is not okay and that you need to talk to an expert. So, do you tend to be irritable most of the time, or have people noticed that about you? Do you tend to be angry most of the time? Do you get frequent mood swings? Do you go through spells of sadness, some of which is explainable, some of which has no explanation? When you feel disappointed, do you feel extreme disappointment most of the time? Do you feel depressed, or have you been feeling depressed for quite some time? Even when there are a lot of people around and you have friends and family, do you still feel lonely? Is there a feeling of emptiness inside of you? Something hollow which is unexplainable, right? And something that you are passionate about and interested in. Have you been seeing drops of levels of passion and interest? What is the sense of purpose in you? Do you have very small amounts of it? Those are the kind of feelings you want to focus on. And then in terms of behaviors, you want to look at, have you been aggressive, a little more aggressive than usual lately? Do you tend to withdraw from others, or are you not interested in going out with friends or socializing? Are you more quieter than usual? Then, in terms of performance at work or in your relationship, or if you're an athlete at training and competition, is there an unexpected drop in your performance? It's not that you don't have passion, you have the passion, but somehow there's no motivation. Now, wherever there's passion, generally there's motivation. But you're passionate about it, you like the sport, but you're unable to give it what it needs. That's not a good situation. That tells you something's not okay. In terms of physical changes, have your energy levels been lately? Have you been on low energy levels most of the time? What is the quality of your sleep? When we talk about quality of your sleep, do you find it difficult to fall asleep? That's one. Or do you keep waking up too often during deep sleep? Do you get a lot of nightmares? Do you avoid sleeping because you don't want to get nightmares, to avoid those nightmares? Or when you kind of fall asleep, and even after 8 or 10 hours, when you wake up, you don't feel refreshed? So these are some things you want to kind of look into. And has it been happening often? Then appetite. Have there been changes to your appetite? Do you feel too hungry too often, or not hungry at all? Some changes. Have you seen that? Changes in your weight and appearance? Have you been gaining weight or losing weight? In your appearance, do you look tired to yourself or not so excited lately? Do you not see the need to kind of maintain personal hygiene, like shower? I'm not talking about makeup and dress up, but basic hygiene. And if you're a person who likes to dress up and do makeup, I mean, if that's what is important to you, then that's important to you. Have there been changes to that? Or do you see a sudden need to dress up perfectly and to impress and to do a lot of makeup? Anything that is unlike you, and if that is a change in your life, then if you're someone who consumes alcohol or cigarettes, have you seen overuse of it, a little more use of it than normal? Have you been taking prescription medication to feel better, countertop medication to feel better, not prescribed, but self-medication, either to fall asleep or feel alive and alert, whatever that might be. So kind of recognizing the signs and symptoms is super important. So those are signs and symptoms that tells you that something is not okay, and it is good to talk to an expert or a loved one to see what you can do. But there are these red flags.
These are red flags.
Those are signs and symptoms only, but they are red flags from a psychology expert. It could be a clinical psychologist. It could be a psychiatrist.
So Sanjana, these are great call outs, a great listing of things for people to be a lot more self-aware. If there's one or two quick actions that people can take, yeah, I'm self-aware, but I don't know what to do. You did mention about reach out to psychologists or clinical physicians. Outside of that, as a general good practice to do, one or two practices, if you can just call out.
Talk to someone you trust and know that it is okay to not feel okay. By that, I mean that when you feel not okay, it's not the end of the world. All right. Either we can reduce that in intensity or sometimes completely become all right. It's not the end of the world, right? So talk to someone, know that it's okay to be not okay, and then be open-minded to talk to an expert. There's a lot of stigma around seeking help. There's nothing wrong in seeking help. When your arm is cut off or when you have an injury, what do? When you get to know you have cancer, the first thing you do is, which doctor do I see? So mind is a part of you.
We had a short masterclass of sorts on mental health. Thank you for sharing those insights. This show is all about creating ripples of inspiration. And if there is an Inspire Someone Today message for all the listeners, what is Sanjana's Inspire Someone Today message?
You know what? I would say be inspired by yourself. And when you're inspired by yourself, then your best exudes out of you, and that perhaps will inspire someone else.
Thank you for listening into today's edition of Inspire Someone Today. It's been a privilege to bring in these conversations. If you like this episode and have any feedback or comments, do mail me at inspiresomeonetodaypodcast@gmail.com. Inspiring someone is like creating ripples around us. If you like what you listen, feel free to share them and let's create ripples of inspiration. Do not forget to follow me on my Instagram handle @InspireSomeoneTodayPodcast for all the latest updates. This is Srikanth, your host, signing off, and until next time, keep inspiring.